everybody, welcome back. This is part 2 of helping your child with anxiety. I hope you've taken a couple minutes to watch part 1. It's really critical, and what you're going to learn today is very helpful, but it's not nearly as helpful as if you have already started to implement what you learned in part 1. So if you haven't already, please go back and watch it, and then come back and finish up with part 2. I think it's really important that I take a moment to explain that I'm not a licensed therapist. I'm a school counselor, I have lots and lots of experience, and I do a ton of research so that I'm able to help my students that I work with. And if you feel like your child needs professional help from a licensed therapist, please don't hesitate to go out and find one. So again, today I have 5 things that I think are going to be really helpful in helping your child deal with anxiety. The first 5 were things that you would do in the moment while the child is actually experiencing the anxious feelings. These are all 5 tips that you would do when the child is nice and calm. You don't want to try and implement one of these strategies in the middle of an anxious episode. You really want to do this when the child's well rested, in a great mood, and really able to think clearly. The first thing that I think is really important that parents do is teach their child about their brain and how their brain works. So I'm going to explain it to you like I explain it to my students. To me, it makes the most sense this way. It's very simplified. Don't get me wrong, and I'm sure I'm skipping over a lot of really important brain information, but when you're trying to explain it to a child, this way works best for me. So we have 2 really important parts of our brain that play a key role in anxiety. The first one is our amygdala. And when I'm explaining this to kids, I call the amygdala the security guard. And I tell kids to imagine they have a mean, tough, buffed up security guard, and his job is to help make sure you're safe. Anything that happens has to go by him. Nothing's getting by him unless he decides that you are safe. If he decides you are not safe, he has 3 options for you. One is to run away, one is to freeze, and one is to fight, either physically or with your words. Millions of years ago, those 3 strategies would have been pretty helpful when the danger was something like a wild animal. But nowadays, the danger is something like school, a test, a performance. And none of those 3 strategies are really going to help your child in those situations. Another really important thing to know about the security guard is that many of us have security guards that take their job just a little bit too seriously. They're very overzealous, and the smallest things they say, "Oh no, you're in danger, I'll handle this." Now, the other part of the brain that I think is super important for kids to know about is called the prefrontal cortex. Now, the prefrontal cortex, I call the professor, and she is smart. She's a great problem solver. She can think down the line and really choose the wisest strategy in any given situation. Now, she's not fully developed until your child is about 26, so don't panic if they can't access her all the time. But we want to build the strength of your prefrontal cortex. Now, what I explain to children is that when the security guard has decided that you're in trouble, he handles the problem. When he has decided you're safe, he will let the professor engage and actually solve the problem, which is what you want. You want her on the job, not him. He's big and buff and strong, but not very smart. She, on the other hand, is wise. Which leads me to tip number 2. Teach your child how to do deep breathing. Many parents want to skip this. It seems boring and silly, and it's something we do all day, every day, so why do we need to learn it and why do we need to practice it? Well, in reality, we breathe all day, but we don't do the kind of breathing that I'm talking about nearly enough. I'm talking about breathing in slowly through your nose, waiting a moment, and breathing out through your mouth. I'm going to link a few videos below, which will teach you and your child how to do this practice. But here's the why. Here's why it's so important. When we are anxious, we want to breathe shallowly and rapidly. That does not get the oxygen where we need it, which is up into the brain and hopefully waking up that professor. This is also very simplified, but I explain to children that a deep, long breath helps calm an overzealous security guard. So when kids are stressed and they start to feel anxiety, we want them to stop and take a nice deep breath. Unfortunately, when you're anxious, you forget. So we need to practice this over and over and over again while they're calm. Perhaps at every red light, perhaps every night before dinner, perhaps every night before bed. But figure out a time where you can practice it when your child's calm. So in the heat of the moment, it's like muscle memory. It's second nature. It won't happen right away. It'll take a while, but don't give up. It's critical. The third strategy for today's video is naming the part of your brain that's the worry brain. Like I said, I call mine the security guard, but that may not resonate with your child. Some kids like to call it their worry brain, Mr. Grumpy Pants, Mrs. Worrywart. But help your child name the part of their brain that worries for them. This is really beneficial because you can talk about it as if it's separate from them. It's called externalizing. And instead of talking to a child as if they're broken or they're too overreactive, we're talking about this one small part of their brain. And they can talk about it too without getting defensive. It's very, very helpful. Okay, step 4. Once your child understands those two basic parts of the brain, you can ask your child what their professor really thinks. So if your child's afraid of dogs, that's their amygdala. That's their worry brain, their security guard. Who's afraid of dogs? In my last video, I talked about how important it was that you don't try to reassure children that their fears are unwarranted. If you tell a child who's terrified of dogs that dogs aren't scary, they're going to look for reasons why, yes, dogs are scary. They want to prove that they're right and you're wrong. In using this strategy, you're actually having the child convince themselves why the fear may be unwarranted. So if you ask them what the professor really thinks, if you tell them, what if I gave you $1 million for coming up with the right answer? Would you believe your professor or would you believe your security guard? Chances are your child's going to know that logically the professor is correct. This is really helpful because you're going to get them to the place where they're realizing that their reaction is an overreaction to a situation. It's so much better than you telling them that. It's much better if they tell themselves that. Okay, the 5th tip, once you've done all the things we've talked about, is to teach your child that they do not have to listen to their security guard. They can, if they want to. But they have to realize that if they have an overzealous security guard, it's going to be telling them, warning, warning, you're in danger all the time. They can decide to take a deep breath and check in with their professor and see what the professor is saying. They can also decide to boss back their security guard. They can say things like, I want you to relax, we're fine. Or something like, I don't have to listen to you. I'm going to listen to the professor today. You want your child to come up with these phrases. You don't want to tell them the phrases. You can brainstorm with them, but it's going to be so much more useful if they come up with them themselves. And you practice them a ton while they're calm. And it's not going to work right away. It may work sometimes and it may not work other times, depending on how tired they are, how stressed they are, how overwhelmed they are. But it will get better with time, and these 5 steps really will help most children feel more in control and less of a victim to their anxiety. If you liked what I talked about today, I have a couple of recommendations for you. Much of the information that I gathered for this video is from an amazing book called Freeing Your Child from Anxiety by Tamar Chansky. There's also a wonderful website called heysigmund.com. If you want to learn more and you want to dig deeper, I recommend you checking out those 2 resources. Thank you so much. Good luck. If you've got questions or comments, please leave them below. Have a great day.